Life with Mark, with the Sterling family, it was everything I'd ever dreamed of. I mean, growing up in orphanages, then bouncing between foster homes, well, stability, kindness, a real home, it felt like something out of a storybook. Mark, he was so handsome, so patient, and his family, they just wrapped me up in their world, a world of old money, sprawling estates, and enough quiet wealth to make your head spin. I tried to fit in, really tried, trying to remember which fork was which, how to carry myself, all the things that felt so alien, but also, honestly, thrilling. One afternoon, I found myself in the drawing room. It was huge, with high ceilings and sunlight streaming through tall, arched windows. We'd had some big social event the night before, a gala or something, and I was still a bit tired from all the forced smiles and delicate conversations. I had a book open on my lap, but my eyes, they kept drifting to the walls. Covered, absolutely covered with portraits. Sterling ancestors, I guess. Generations of stern-faced men and elegant women, all looking down, judging me, maybe. I remember my eyes settling on one particular painting. It was of a young woman, maybe a bit older than me, with dark, heavy hair and one of those impossibly slender necks, adorned with a pearl necklace that seemed to glow in the dim light of the canvas. Her eyes were dark too, deep-set, with a kind of, well, a piercing stare. I was looking at her, just sort of lost in thought, and then, for a split second, I swear I saw them. Her eyes. They seemed to shift, just a fraction, following me as my head tilted. My breath caught. I blinked, hard, and looked again. Nothing. Just paint on canvas, those dark eyes fixed straight ahead, as they always had been. It must have been the light, I told myself, or maybe I was just tired. Still, a shiver ran down my spine, a quick, cold spike that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. I rubbed my arms, feeling my skin prickle. Probably just my imagination running wild, from all the newness, all the, well, all the oldness of this place. This old, old house. I closed the book, stood up, needing something to break the quiet. A cup of herbal tea, that's what I needed. So I wandered into the kitchen. It was enormous, gleaming with stainless steel and marble, but somehow still had the feel of a place where generations had cooked. I filled the kettle, watching the water swirl. And then I heard it. A soft, distinct creak. Upstairs. Somewhere on the main landing, I thought, just outside one of the bedrooms. It stopped, as suddenly as it began. I stopped what I was doing, tilting my head, listening. Nothing. Just the hum of the refrigerator. I looked up at the ceiling, at the grand staircase visible from the kitchen entryway. No one was there. The silence that followed felt heavy. And then a breath of cold air. It just brushed past my shoulder. The windows were all closed. I actually shivered again, a real one this time. My heart started thumping a bit faster, a nervous flutter. "Come on, Elena," I muttered to myself. "It's an old house. Old houses make noises, and drafts." I almost laughed, but it felt like a laugh would just break the spell, and maybe trigger something worse. I fumbled for the light switch over the sink, needing more brightness, needing to chase away the creeping whatever it was. The fluorescent lights flickered on, buzzing softly. In the sudden flood of light, just for a flicker, the absolute shortest moment, I thought I saw a shadow. A vague, dark shape, melting back into the corner where the kitchen met the pantry wall. So quick, it was gone before my brain could even properly register it. Fast, too fast, like a breath you didn't quite catch.
My hands actually started shaking a bit as I poured the hot water into the teapot. Enough of this. I clutched the warm mug, not even waiting for the tea to steep properly. I practically speed-walked back to my room, closing the heavy oak door behind me. I turned the lock with a definitive click. A small, almost childish act, but it made me feel a fraction safer. I tried to focus, to tell myself it was nothing. Just my mind playing tricks. The new environment, the stress of wanting to make a good impression. But the image of that woman in the portrait, her eyes, the way they seemed to smile silently in my mind, it refused to leave me alone. Later that evening, at dinner, things got weirder.
We were all sat around the long, polished mahogany table. Sterling dinners were always formal affairs, even when it was just us. Mark, his parents, sometimes an aunt or uncle. Tonight, it was just the five of us, including me. The housekeeper, Mrs. Albright, she was serving the main course. A roast, I think. She moved like a ghost, silent, efficient, her face usually a polite, impersonal mask. She placed a plate in front of me, the heavy porcelain clinking softly. As she leaned in, setting it down, her eyes. They met mine, direct, unblinking, and for a split second, a tiny, almost imperceptible curve at the corner of her mouth. It was gone before I could even be sure I'd seen it. But right then, in that exact moment, a breathy whisper, impossibly soft, brushed my ear. "Be careful." The voice. It was faint, barely there, like a dry leaf rustling close by. And it sounded young, very young. A girl, maybe. It definitely wasn't Mrs. Albright's low, gravelly voice. My throat went dry. I swallowed, hard. The food suddenly a lump in my mouth. I looked at Mrs. Albright, my eyes wide. But she just straightened up, her face back to that unreadable mask, and smoothly, calmly moved on to refill Mark's water glass. Like nothing had happened. Like I had imagined it. I glanced around the table. No one else seemed to notice anything. Mark was talking to his father about some new investment. Mrs. Sterling was politely dabbing her lips with a napkin. They were all so normal. I tried to eat, but the food tasted like ash. That whisper, "Be careful." It clung to my thoughts, buzzing like a trapped fly. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not the whisper itself, but the way Mrs. Albright had looked at me. That tiny, almost smile. It felt like a secret. A shared secret I wasn't privy to. That night, sleep didn't come easy. My mind kept replaying the whisper, Mrs. Albright's eyes, the shadow in the kitchen. Eventually, exhaustion won, and I drifted off. But my dreams were anything but restful. I was in this place, a room made of dark, rough stone. The walls weren't smooth. They were carved with things. Not pictures, not words, but shapes. Twisted, looping, almost organic patterns that looked like nothing I'd ever seen. Creatures, maybe? Or parts of creatures. I felt this intense, familiar feeling wash over me, a sense of belonging that was also somehow chilling. It was real, in the dream, so real. I woke up with a gasp, my heart hammering. My room was dark, quiet, just the way I'd left it. But there was a smell, faint, definitely, like incense, an earthy, sweet, heavy scent. It wasn't my incense. I didn't burn incense. It lingered in the air, a ghost of scent, proving that something from the dream, or something tied to that strange room, had seeped into my reality. I pulled the blankets up to my chin, staring into the shadow-draped corners of my opulent room.
My room, but not really mine, was it? The next morning, while getting ready, I found a small bruise, just a reddish-purple mark on my left wrist, near the pulse point. I didn't remember bumping into anything. I was usually so careful. Mark came in then, holding a silk scarf, deep burgundy, I think. He saw the bruise. He smiled, a soft, easy smile, the kind that always melt a little. "Oh, love," he said, his voice gentle. "You must have bumped into the table edge again last night when you were half asleep." He brushed his thumb lightly over the bruise. But I knew I hadn't. I was sure. I hadn't gotten up. I hadn't bumped into anything. My memory felt clear on that point, distinctly clear. But he was so convincing, so dismissive, in that easy, loving way. My memory, it felt fuzzy, like he'd just taken a brush and smoothed out the edges of it. I looked at the dark silk scarf he was still holding. For some reason, as I looked at it, I felt this strange, almost imperceptible pressure around my wrist, like something was tightening around it, just for a second. The feeling was so real it made me flinch. He didn't seem to notice. He just folded the scarf neatly. I tried to talk to Mark later that day, needing to get it all out. The portrait, the creaking, the cold draft, the shadow, the whisper, Mrs. Albright's smile, even the bruise, everything. I needed him to tell me I wasn't going crazy. He listened, really listened, sitting beside me on the velvet couch in his private study.
His expression was full of concern, and he took my hand, his fingers warm around mine. "My love," he started, his voice soft, reassuring. "I know you're new here, and everything feels, well, it's a lot to get used to. Sometimes our minds, they play tricks on us when we're stressed." He squeezed my hand gently, then stood up, walking towards the large, ornate mirror above the fireplace. He flipped a switch, and the wall sconces beside the mirror lit up, bathing the reflection in warm light. "Look," he said, turning back to me, eyes kind. "Look, my dear, what do you see in the mirror?" I looked. My reflection stared back, my own eyes, tired and worried, staring straight at the glass, at myself. But then, no, it wasn't me. My reflection. Those eyes in the mirror, they weren't looking at me. They were looking at Mark. A blank gaze, yes, but also a knowing one. As if they understood something I didn't. As if they had already seen something that was yet to come. It was my face, but the expression was all wrong. And when my reflection blinked, its movement was off, slower, a beat behind my own. My stomach twisted. Mark turned back to me, the kind smile still plastered on his face. But his eyes, there was a spark in them, a flash, something cold, something that seemed to hide a great deal. "There's nothing there," Mark said, his voice still so gentle. "You're just quite stressed, that's all, my darling." He hadn't even looked into the mirror himself, not really. I lay in bed later, curled up under the thick duvet, trying to push away all the horrifying thoughts. But the image of my reflection, those strange, knowing eyes looking at Mark, it kept flashing in my mind. The world felt like it was tilting, just slightly. I reached up, my fingers brushing against the silver necklace Mark had given me when I first arrived. A delicate chain with a small silver S for sterling, and a deep blue gemstone, almost black in the dim light. I traced the contour of the stone. It felt warm, warmer than it should be. And as my finger lingered on its smooth surface, a whisper, not in my ear this time, but inside my head, faint but distinct. "I have chosen you."
The voice wasn't like Mrs. Albright's dry rustle. This one was deeper, older, yes, but also resonant, like a bell rung deep underground. I snatched my hand away instinctively. A jolt, a cold current, seemed to shoot from the necklace, through my fingers, and down into my very bones. I stared at the dark blue stone. In the gloom of the room, it seemed to pulse just a tiny bit, like a silent eye slowly opening. That morning, I tried to pretend that necklace wasn't hot, that the whisper wasn't real. I really did. My head ached, a dull, throbbing thing behind my eyes. I probably hadn't slept well, that was it. Just tired. So, I figured, a quiet day, a book, the library. It always felt grand, I guess, all that polished wood and old leather, a place where nothing bad could really happen. I was in there, tucked away by one of the tall windows, when I heard something. A low murmur. It wasn't the usual sound of Mrs. Albright arranging flowers or a servant polishing silver. This was deeper, from somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. I knew that. The Sterling house, it had rules, unspoken ones mostly. Areas that were just not for guests, especially not for me. The sound seemed to be coming from a corner of the library I rarely ventured into, where a heavy carved oak door stood mostly unnoticed. It was usually closed, locked even, I figured. But now it was just ajar, a sliver of darkness begging for a peek. The murmuring continued, hushed, rhythmic, like a prayer, but not one I recognized. It felt wrong, like a sound meant for deeper places. My heart started thumping, just a little at first, then harder. I told myself it was just my imagination, or maybe some staff doing inventory in a supply closet, anything but a secret ritual. But curiosity, or maybe just plain stupidity, tugged at me. I stood up, slowly, telling my legs to stay put, but they didn't listen. I walked towards that door, my footsteps impossibly loud on the Persian rug. I paused just outside, pressing my ear against the cool wood. The murmurs were clearer now, and beneath them a low, soft scraping sound, like something being dragged or something shifting. A small shiver ran down my back. I took a breath, held it, and then I heard it, a faint gurgle from deep inside. That morning, I tried to pretend that necklace wasn't hot, that the whisper wasn't real. I really did. My head ached, a dull, throbbing thing behind my eyes. I probably hadn't slept well, that was it. Just tired. So, I figured, a quiet day, a book, the library. It always felt grand, I guess, all that polished wood and old leather, a place where nothing bad could really happen. I was in there, tucked away by one of the tall windows, when I heard something. A low murmur. It wasn't the usual sound of Mrs. Albright arranging flowers or a servant polishing silver. This was deeper, from somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. I knew that. The Sterling house, it had rules, unspoken ones mostly. Areas that were just not for guests, especially not for me. The sound seemed to be coming from a corner of the library I rarely ventured into, where a heavy, carved oak door stood mostly unnoticed. It was usually closed, locked even, I figured. But now it was just ajar, a sliver of darkness begging for a peek. The murmuring continued, hushed, rhythmic, like a prayer, but not one I recognized. It felt wrong, like a sound meant for deeper places. My heart started thumping, just a little at first, then harder. I told myself it was just my imagination, or maybe some staff doing inventory in a supply closet, anything but a secret ritual. But curiosity, or maybe just plain stupidity, tugged at me. I stood up, slowly, telling my legs to stay put, but they didn't listen. I walked towards that door, my footsteps impossibly loud on the Persian rug. I paused just outside, pressing my ear against the cool wood. The murmurs were clearer now, and beneath them a low, soft scraping sound, like something being dragged or something shifting. A small shiver ran down my back. I took a breath, held it, and then I heard it. A faint gurgle from deep inside.
Like a stomach churning, or something else entirely. I pushed the door open, just a fraction more. My eyes, they strained in the dim light inside. There he was, Mark, and his mother, Mrs. Sterling, stood beside him. They were facing away from me, towards a raised stone platform in the center of the room. It was covered, yes, with a dark, heavy cloth. But even so, I could make out its shape, rough and old. And Mark was speaking. The language, it wasn't English. It wasn't anything I knew. It was guttural, full of odd clicks and hisses, like wind whispering through old bones. And his voice, it had a ringing quality I'd never heard before. Then he stopped mid-sentence, his head tilted. He knew I was there. Mark turned, slowly. His eyes, they were wide, wild, panicked. And then a flicker of something else, anger. It was so fast, that change. He moved, quick, snatching the dark fabric, yanking it down over the stone platform, like trying to hide something precious, something ugly. "Elena!" His voice was sharp, a whip crack in the air. "What are you doing here?" He took a step towards me, his face tight. "You are not to be in here. It's a private family area. Always has been." He just stood there, blocking the view of whatever was behind the cloth. His jaw was set. I felt something cold in my stomach. It wasn't his anger that got me, not really. It was the swift, almost inhuman way he'd pivoted. The fear in his eyes, quickly replaced by a cold fury. It was all wrong. My breath caught, stuck in my throat. I just nodded, swallowed, trying to say something, anything, but nothing came out. I just backed away, slowly, out of the room, leaving him there, stiff and watchful. He didn't follow me, just stood there, guarding. Later that afternoon, the memory of Mark's face, that strange language, it just wouldn't leave me alone. I kept replaying it. I walked back towards the library, my hands clammy. The door was closed now, but not locked. I checked. It was just closed. I pushed it open, just a crack, and slipped inside. The room was dark, the sun having moved on. Incense, faint but definitely there, clung to the air. That same, earthy, sweet, heavy scent from my dream. I moved to where Mark had been standing. The platform was still covered. I didn't dare touch it. I didn't even want to breathe near it. My eyes scanned the surrounding bookshelves. Most were filled with leather-bound classics, works of history, philosophy. But then on a lower shelf, almost hidden behind a thicker, heavier tome, I saw it. A book. No title. Just plain, worn black leather, thick and rough. It looked old, really old. My fingers trembled as I pulled it out. It was heavier than it looked, and it was cold, almost frozen to the touch. The scent wafted up from its pages, unmistakable now. Damp earth and something metallic, like old blood mixed with iron. I opened it, my heart beating fast. It wasn't a book of words, not really. It was full of drawings,
strange looping symbols, like something a child might doodle if they were seeing nightmares. And pictures. Figures, tall and thin, with too many limbs, or limbs that twisted into forms they shouldn't. And eyes. Always eyes. Dark, almond-shaped, with pupils that were just slashes. One drawing, on a spread of 2 pages, was just a pair of eyes. Dark, deep-set. And I swear, they were the exact same eyes as the woman in the portrait, the one that had seemed to follow me. As I stared at them, the light in the library seemed to dim. The corners of the room deepened into shadows, swallowing the bookshelves. The old wood of the desk, the rich carpet, they all seemed to lose their color, becoming flat and gray. I felt a coldness creep up my arms, a profound chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. It was like the book was breathing, sucking the life out of the air around me. I slammed it shut, a sudden panicked movement. The light seemed to return, almost instantly, though the shadows still felt heavier than before. I shoved the book back onto the shelf, my hands shaking. What the hell was that? I was still a bit spooked, trying to shake off the images from the book, when I heard footsteps on the grand staircase. Mark. I froze. Too late to act normal. I grabbed a random book, anything, and pretended to read. He walked into the library, his gaze sweeping the room. He didn't look at me directly, not at first, just scanned. Then his eyes settled on me. A long, silent stare.
He didn't smile, didn't say anything about the forbidden room. He just walked to a painting on the far wall, one of a stern-faced man holding a quill. And he said, his voice softer now, too soft, "Do you know sometimes people will say things they don't mean, just to save themselves?" He didn't look at me when he said it. His eyes were fixed on the painting, on the old painted face. The implication hung in the air, heavy and sharp. My blood ran cold. Was he talking about me or about someone else? His words felt like a warning or a threat. I didn't know which was worse. He just stood there for another moment, then turned and left as silently as he'd come, leaving me with that question hanging in the air. I couldn't sit still after that. The air in the library felt thick, making it hard to breathe. Something was happening, something big. I needed to move. I needed to do something. So I just wandered. My restless energy took me down a back hallway, towards the service areas, places I seldom went. I ended up in the laundry room. It was huge, full of gleaming machines, the air smelling faintly of soap and bleach. Mrs. Albright was there, as always, her back to me. She was unfolding a large white sheet, placing it carefully on a stainless steel table. Something about the way she handled it caught my eye. Too gingerly. My gaze snagged on the fabric. It wasn't pristine white, not anymore. There were stains, dark, reddish-brown, dried, not fresh, old, like they'd been there a while. Lots of them, streaks and blotches across the pure white. I took a step closer, my hand reaching out, almost without thinking. My fingers brushed the fabric. It felt stiff, sticky. A tiny prickle of goosebumps ran up my arm. That smell again. Faint, metallic, like the book, like blood. Just as my fingers lingered on the dried marks, a shout echoed from the main staircase. "Elena, what are you doing here?" My head snapped up. Mark stood in the doorway, his chest heaving slightly. His eyes, they were bloodshot, deep crimson, not from lack of sleep. They were practically glowing, and he was furious. He crossed the room in 2 strides, a blur of motion. He ripped the sheet from my hand, violently, too violently. As he yanked, his sleeve rode up, just a tiny bit, and I saw it. His hand.
It was pale, impossibly pale, nearly translucent. And beneath the surface, green veins bulged and twisted, like roots gripping dead earth, pulsing with a faint, unnatural light. Not veins. Something else. Something I couldn't name. It was there, then gone, as his sleeve fell back down. A blink and you miss it horror. My stomach churned. It wasn't fear that coursed through me. It was revulsion, a profound, deep-seated disgust. This wasn't Mark, not really. He took a deep, shuddering breath. His eyes, in an instant, were back to normal, a dark, worried brown. His face, still tight with anger, but now human. He didn't yell again. He just stood there, holding the bundled sheet, looking at me. His stare was enough. Cold. So incredibly cold. I thought you knew better than to be in the staff's areas, Elena. His voice was low, flat, without warmth. I trust you have a good reason to be here. I just shook my head. Nothing. I had no reason, no excuse. He just looked at me, then at the ruined sheet in his hand, then back at me. No more words. Just that look. My skin crawled. I felt like a bug pinned beneath a glass. I needed to call someone, anyone. I stumbled back to my room, my mind racing. My mobile phone, the expensive one Mark had bought for me, was on the nightstand. I grabbed it, my fingers fumbling. I tried calling Sarah, my old friend from the orphanage. Dialing, nothing. A dead tone, static. I tried again, same thing. I tried my foster mother, Mary. No signal. The phone, it just kept glitching, screen flickering. Then, for a split second, an old photo flashed on the screen. It was me and Mark from when we first started dating. Happy, smiling. He was holding a crimson rose, holding it out to me. But in the photo on the screen now, the rose was wrong. It wasn't red. It was a purplish bruise, almost black. The petals looked withered, rotting. My happy memory, it was tainted. It hit me then, hard. All my connections, cut, gone. I was here, alone, trapped. Panic, cold and sharp, started to set in. My breath came in ragged gasps. I ran to the bathroom, desperate for something to ground me, anything.
I twisted the cold water tap, splashing handfuls of icy water onto my face, into my hair. I gasped, shaking my head, trying to clear the fog, the fear, the absolute terror building inside me. I looked up, into the mirror. My reflection stared back, my eyes wide and wild. But as I watched, something shifted. My reflection didn't quite keep up. There was a delay, a beat, then another. I squinted, trying to make sense of it, and then it changed, right there, in the glass. My reflection. It was older, decades older. My skin was sunken, my eyes hollow, and there were lines, deep, raw, like scars, crisscrossing my cheeks. Not my face, not the me I knew. Then the mouth of that impossibly old, scarred reflection opened, and a sound. Not a voice, more like a dry rustling, a whisper. But it wasn't from my throat. It was everywhere, in the walls, in the air. 1,000 tiny voices, all speaking at once, rough and dry, in my head, but also in the closed room. You will never escape us. A scream tore through my own throat. I slammed my hand onto the mirror, a desperate, animalistic cry. The glass shattered. 1,000 shards rained down into the porcelain sink, onto the tiled floor. My hands were stinging, bleeding slightly where fragments had nicked my skin. I stood there, trembling, looking down at the broken pieces.
In one of the larger shards, I saw a reflection. It was pale, with eyes that were utterly black, like two holes punched into a sheet of paper. But it wasn't me. It was a different woman, a stranger, someone I didn't recognize. Her face was gaunt, the mouth twisted into a silent scream. I spun around, my blood freezing in my veins. Mark. He was standing in the doorway of the bathroom, holding a fresh towel. He must have heard me scream, heard the breaking glass. But his face, it held no surprise, no alarm. He just looked at the broken mirror, at my shaking hands, at the fear on my face. Nothing. Just a blank, detached gaze. "Come now, my love," he said, his voice soft, almost soothing. But it wasn't. It was chilling. "You need rest. Tonight, it will all end." My mind reeled. Rest? End? What did that even mean? He hadn't flinched, not even an eyebrow raised at the smashed mirror, or the sound, or whatever was in my reflection. He knew. He knew what I had seen. He expected it. I stumbled out of the bathroom, the smell of fresh blood mixing with the lingering metallic scent. My eyes darted to the grandfather clock in the hallway. Its heavy pendulum swung back and forth, a slow, inevitable tick-tock. The long hand was pointing straight up, right to the 12. And then, just as I watched, a dark, thick liquid started to ooze from the number 12. Not a drop, an impossibly slow, oily stream. Black, almost like crude oil. It snaked its way down the clock face, spreading, staining the polished wood, crawling over the minute and hour hands, coating them in a slick, viscous darkness. It defied gravity, defying everything. It just kept flowing. It wasn't just a night beginning. I knew it, with a bone-deep certainty that settled into my very soul. This wasn't just another strange day in the Sterling house. This was it, the final bell. The thick, heavy liquid had stopped flowing from the grandfather clock, but its black stain remained, mocking me in the half-light of the hallway. Mark's words echoed. "Tonight it will all end." And yet there he was, standing still, just watching me with that blank, distant look. Not a word more. He just waited. I didn't really walk. I just moved. One foot after the other, a robot in my own body. Someone, or something, was waiting for me. I guess I knew that. It was like I was pushed, a gentle but firm hand on my back, urging me forward, down a flight of narrow stone steps I'd never seen before. Each step was cold under my bare feet. The air down here, it was heavy, like breathing in wet soil. But then there was this other smell too, sweet and metallic, making my stomach churn. It reminded me of something old, something left to rot under the ground, but not quite. It was worse. The walls were rough, uneven stone, and on them carvings, lots of them. They weren't pretty like the ones upstairs, not elegant cherubs or family crests. These were twisted. Figures, sort of human, but stretched out, with too many joints or too few. Their heads were wrong, their bodies too long. And they all had these eyes, dark, slitted things, staring out of the stone.
They seemed to follow me as the torchlight flickered, just like the portrait upstairs. I shivered, but not from the cold. At the bottom of the steps, a large chamber opened up. It wasn't a room, not really, more like a cave cut out of the living rock. And in the middle, around a raised stone slab, they were there. The Sterling family, all of them. Mrs. Sterling, the aunts and uncles, even Mark's grandfather, a man I'd only seen in stiff, ancient photographs. They wore robes, heavy, black things that swallowed their forms, the hoods pulled low. But their eyes shone, a deep, ugly red. Not really glowing, but reflecting the torchlight in a way that made them look like embers burning hot in the dark. And Mark, he was standing right across from me. No robes for him. He was just Mark in a dark suit. But his face, it was flat, empty, no emotions showing at all, like someone scraped everything off. He didn't look at me, not directly. His eyes were fixed on the stone slab. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs. Oh God, this was it. They started to move. Slow, rhythmic, a soft shuffle of feet on the stone floor. And then the sound began. A whisper at first from one of the robed figures. Then another, and another. Soon the whole room was filled with it. Not a language I knew, not any human language. It was a guttural sound, deep in the throat, mixing with clicks and hisses. Like wind through old bones, yes, but also like something trying to speak, trying to shape sounds it wasn't built for, trying and failing, or maybe succeeding. I felt a weight press down on me. It wasn't just the air, though that was thick and heavy like a blanket. It was physical, like a hand, a massive, invisible hand, pressing on my chest, squeezing the breath out of me. It came with the chanting, pushed down with every distorted sound they made. I gasped, tried to move, but the ropes, they were tighter now, digging into my wrists, my ankles. I could feel the rough strands biting into my skin, tearing it. A thin line of warmth spread across my arm. Blood. I could smell it, faint but there, mixing with the sickeningly sweet scent in the air. The carvings on the walls, they started to shift. Not really moving, but the shadows danced around them in a different way. And the eyes. Those carved, slitted eyes, they seemed to catch a light of their own. A bruised purple sort of glow, pulsing faintly with the rhythm of the chant. It was all so much, too much. My mind screamed, but no sound came out. My throat was raw, dry. I couldn't even manage a whimper. The chanting grew louder, harsher, like 1,000 sandpaper voices scraping against each other. And then the stone slab in the middle of the room began to vibrate. Just a tiny tremor at first, then growing stronger. A low rumble, deep in the earth, came from beneath it. I saw a crack appear in the floor, then another. The air grew colder, impossibly cold, even with the torches burning. My teeth chattered, a frantic rhythm. Then, slowly, from the crack in the floor, from a hole I hadn't noticed before, it rose. Not a person, not an animal, a mass, a thing. It was deeply, completely black, like a hole ripped in the world itself. It didn't have a shape, not really. It shifted, oozed, growing larger, looming over us. It was like looking at smoke that was also solid, or darkness that had learned to breathe. No eyes, no mouth, but I knew, with the kind of certainty that freezes your blood, that it was looking at me. I could feel its cold breath on my face, a breeze that stole the warmth right out of my skin.
A limb emerged from the mass. It stretched, grew longer, thinner, impossibly far. It was gray-black, with a texture like old dried volcanic rock, rough and scaly. It was bony, too thin, like a spider's leg, but much, much bigger. It moved with this horrible, deliberate slowness. I tried to scream, to yank against the ropes, but it was useless. Pain flared where the rope bit into my skin. Tiny drops of blood dripped onto the stone floor. That scaly arm reached for me, reached for my face. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for a burning, tearing pain. But it was just cold. A finger-like projection, rough and cold like dead ash, touched my forehead, placed it there. And then Mark was there too. Beside me, his hand on my shoulder. His grip was tight, too tight. It crushed my collarbone. His eyes. Oh God, his eyes.
They were no longer the deep brown I knew, no longer even the bloodshot red from before. They were just black, completely, utterly black, like two holes punched into his face, empty. And his voice. When he spoke, it wasn't Mark's voice. It was a growl, low and rumbling, as if several rough voices were speaking at once, tangled together, coming out of him. It twisted his words. "Don't be afraid, Elena," it said. "You will be the perfect vessel." I stared at him, at that black, empty face, at that horrible, twisted sound. It wasn't Mark. It wasn't. This thing had stolen him. Or maybe it had always been there, just hidden. A surge of something hot, not fear, but pure, absolute revulsion shot through me. I moved, not even thinking. Instinct. I lowered my head and bit down, hard, on his hand, the one gripping my shoulder. I felt it, the skin, the muscle, and then a burst of fluid in my mouth, metallic, coppery, salty, like blood. But it wasn't just blood. It was colder, thicker. Mark, the thing that looked like Mark, didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't even twitch. His black eyes remained fixed on nothing, staring straight ahead, past me, past everything. He was just an empty shell. No, he was a gateway, and he was holding me. As that scaly arm pressed harder on my forehead, a jolt shot through me. Not pain, not exactly. More like a searing heat spreading from my forehead, down my spine, into my stomach. It felt like something was being poured into me, boiling hot. My own blood felt like it was simmering, struggling against this invasion. And then the memories came. Not mine, but they were in my head. A torrent, a flood. Images, sounds, smells, feelings. Ancient rituals, yes, like the ones carved on the walls. Faces, hundreds of them, men and women, young and old. Each one a fleeting image of terror, of screaming. I saw their eyes, wide with confusion, then darkening with despair. I heard their cries, echoing in my mind, a chorus of agony. I saw a flickering glimpse of a woman with long, pale hair. Abigail, her face twisted in a silent scream just before fading into darkness. It confirmed everything. All those people, all those chosen ones, sacrificed, just like me. And I felt it, the connection, a tendril, a branch, something dark and foreign had rooted itself inside me.
It wasn't just an external terror anymore. It was in me, a part of me. The thing I had run from, that I had tried to escape, it was in my bones, in my blood. I was connected. To it, to all of them. A raw, animalistic scream finally tore through me, not because of the pain of the ropes, not even because of the memories, but because of this knowing, this sickening connection. With a desperate, thrashing movement, I yanked back against the ropes, a frantic, mindless struggle. My head snapped back, my elbow in its panicked flailed arc slammed into something. A clatter, a crash. One of the large ceremonial candles, tall and thick, went flying. It landed on the altar, on the dark, heavy cloth that covered the stone slab. A tiny flame flickered, then caught, smoldering, then rising. In an instant, the cloth was ablaze. Chaos. Not the kind I expected. The Sterling family members, still cloaked, still chanting, they didn't scream for themselves. Their guttural cries turned into something higher, more frantic. They moved, not to put out the fire, but away from it, away from the altar, away from the raging flames that now seemed to hurt the shifting dark mass that had risen from the pit. The entity itself seemed to retract, to shrink back, a low, rumbling sound coming from it, like a wounded animal. No, not an animal. Something else. In that flicker of frantic movement, in the light of the growing flames, I saw it. Tucked behind the altar, small and unassuming, a door, a wooden door, almost flush with the stone, easy to miss, but it was there, and it was slightly ajar, a sliver of black, a passage, hope, a tiny ember, but it was enough. I thrashed again, pushing with all my strength. The ropes, weakened by my earlier struggles, maybe even scorched by the unexpected heat, gave way. Not entirely, but enough. I rolled, scrambled. The Sterling family was still scattering, their red eyes darting between the burning altar and the retreating entity. No one seemed to notice me, or maybe they just didn't care. I pushed myself up, my legs weak and shaking. I ran, a desperate, limping run, towards that small, dark crack of a doorway.
I didn't look back, not at first. My lungs burned, my throat was raw. I pushed myself through the opening, into a narrow, dark tunnel. It was cold, colder than the ritual chamber. The air was thick with dust and the smell of old earth. I could hear it then, behind me. The chanting had stopped, replaced by a low, furious growling, and the sound of quick, heavy footsteps. They were coming for me. I just ran. My hands scraped against the rough stone walls. I stumbled, fell, pushed myself up again. The tunnel twisted, turned. It felt like forever. I could hear them closer now. Hear the distinct thud of feet, the occasional hiss. My heart was a frantic drum. I wouldn't make it. I couldn't. Then, ahead, a faint light, a crack. I threw my last bit of strength into a sprint. I reached the end, a heavy wooden door. It wasn't locked. I slammed against it, pushing it open, and tumbled out. Cool air, wet grass, moonlight. I was outside. The mansion loomed behind me, dark and silent, its grand facade a lie. No sounds of pursuit, just the gentle whisper of the wind through the trees. I had done it. I
was out. But I kept running. Across the manicured lawns, over the hedge, into the dark, silent fields beyond. I ran until my lungs screamed, until my legs felt like lead. I didn't know where I was going. Just away. Away from that house. Away from them. Finally, I collapsed. My breath hitched, rasping in my throat. I lay there on the cold, damp earth, staring up at the moon, my body shaking uncontrollably. I was free. I was alive. Then I pushed myself up, my arms trembling. I looked down at my hands. They were scraped, bruised. And my wrist, where the rope had dug in. There it was. Not a wound, not a cut. It was a scar, a symbol, swirling and intricate, black as the oil that had oozed from the clock. It was etched deep into my skin. It didn't hurt, but it was ice cold to the touch. I tried to rub it off, but it wouldn't budge. It wasn't a stain. It was part of me, a living tattoo, a mark. I had escaped the cage, yes, but the curse, it was stuck to me. It wasn't just in the mansion anymore. It was here, in me. I eventually found myself on a deserted country road. It was still hours before dawn. The air was cold, but I barely felt it. My mind felt fuzzy, disconnected. I walked for what felt like an eternity, until a flickering light appeared in the distance, a bus stop sign, and then a bus. I stumbled onto it, the driver barely glancing at me, a young woman covered in dirt and scratches. I didn't care. I paid him with the few crumpled bills I still had in my pocket. I found a seat at the back, curling into a tight ball, my head against the cold window glass. The bus rumbled forward, leaving the dark, still countryside behind. Towns blurred past, fields, more towns. My life had changed completely. I couldn't trust anyone, not anymore. I brought my hand up, my fingers brushing against the black scar on my wrist. It was still ice cold, a constant reminder. I thought about Mark, about the Sterling family, about the thing that had risen from the pit. Had I really escaped it? Or was this just part of a bigger plan? Maybe they had let me go. Maybe this was how it worked. A new beginning for them and for me. I looked out the window, at my reflection superimposed on the passing darkness. My eyes, dark and haunted, stared back at me. And then, for a split second, my reflection's mouth opened, and a voice, a dry, raspy whisper, not my own, not outside, but from deep inside me. They will find me in you, Elena. I just squeezed my eyes shut. I knew then. My fight had just begun, and the biggest enemy, the one I truly couldn't escape, wasn't on the path behind me. It was here, in me.